Thank you everyone for coming. How many of you are new milliners or students just learning and all that sort of thing? One? No, more than that I'm sure. If you started in millinery maybe 20 years ago, you would have found that there was a very sparse selection of hat blocks available to you, almost pre-internet, right at the start of it. Most block makers' catalogues were very basic, and about 20 odd years ago when Dad started, he made buttons which took off, and then globally everyone starts making button shapes. When I first joined the business back about 2010, 2011, my first trade show was at a millinery convention in Wagga, and Dad said to me, your challenge is to come up with 40 new shapes that have never been used or seen in millinery. Now I had really no millinery and no hat block experience, but I do have a sculpting background. So I came up with 40 shapes and put them on the website and released them in Wagga, and kind of responsible for the explosion of different shapes that started appearing at the races over the next 4, 5, 6 years. And then throughout the rest of the world, that idea of fascinating shapes took off. And now globally with the internet, you can get dozens and dozens and dozens of types of shapes. But it's created a bit of a challenge for block makers, because now you've got such a choice and you almost are spoilt for choice, and it's like, where do you get them from? Who do you get them from? So I get a lot of emails from people sending me photographs of hat blocks from various other manufacturers in the world, in particular in Europe, saying, can you make me this? And my reply is, yes I can, but no I won't. Because my answer is, if you like the block that has been made by Boon and Lane, or if you like that block by Guy Mills Brown Hat Blocks, or by someone in Holland or Poland or wherever they all are, honour that block maker by buying their block. Don't ask me to copy it, because the answer will be no. But it creates a challenge, because all the block makers want to try and have something that is kind of similar without stealing the idea from someone else. So my answer is often, come up with your own idea. And I'll say, sculpt it out of foam, make it out of cardboard, make it out of clay, plaster of Paris. Send it to me to make it as a hat block, and then it's yours. And what I find happening now is I'm getting the pictures of the hats made off custom one-off blocks that the design belongs to the milliner that came up with it. Can you make me this please? And I go, no I can't, that belongs to so-and-so. So when you're seeing a picture on the internet of someone's hat, and then you go to a block maker and say, can I have that? You could be pinching someone else's unique design. And the challenge for the block maker is, if you don't know where that photo was sourced or who had it, you know, it's like, do I make that or don't I make that? So I'm always emailing back, where did you get that from? Whose is that? Do I have permission? And sometimes emailing the milliner and saying, I've got a request for that. Can I make it? Because if they come to me and want an exclusive thing, I'm not making it. But my answer to them is, I won't copy it, but I can't promise that someone else won't copy it. Because particularly, people think that there's like 4 block makers in the world. I'll tell you now, there's more like 24. And there's more like 6 professional block makers in the world, as I would call them. That's where that is all they do. Their workshops are set up, some of them employ staff, and that's all they do. And then the rest of them are people who are perhaps retired, doing it on the weekend, and many of those don't come up with their own ideas or their own blocks. They will look through catalogues of the established block makers and they'll go, I'll make that. In fact, Guy Morse Brown Hat Block sent me an email a month or so ago alerting me that someone was actually not only stealing our design but stealing our images and making blocks. And they were doing that to Guy Morse Brown Hat Blocks, and I think it might have been Easy Hat Blocks, I'm not sure. So that's another challenge for the block maker, because now there are all these smaller people who are not paying taxes, they're not probably declaring income, they're copying other people's designs and very often doing it very poorly, or the blocks are wobbly and wonky, they don't have the customer service. So my plea to Australian milliners in particular is to buy from the established block makers who are going to be there for you. And I don't mind if you buy from European block makers. If you like their shape more than mine, buy theirs. Don't ask me to copy it, and I'm sure they feel exactly the same. But when you're sourcing your hat blocks, don't look for cheap hat blocks just because someone else is half price or something like that, because you can end up shooting yourselves in the foot if, for example, the established block makers don't get support because people are buying cheap foam blocks or balsa blocks, which they're not practical, they look good, they make one hat, they crush and they crumble, or people that are knocking off shapes. If that kind of thing happens, you can be at risk of losing your block makers, because your block makers can say, well, we're not getting support, we can't make a living anymore, we need to go and do something else, and then where do you source hat blocks from? So copying is a bit of a challenge these days because of the internet, and more and more milliners are complaining that I came up with my unique shape and now someone is copying it, and I've seen where that's happened. So if you see a shape, don't copy it, make your own. If you see another unique shape at the races that you've never seen, always think someone may have paid a lot of money to have an exclusive block. Think about that before you just say to someone else, oh, make me that, or you go and make your own. And you might only make 1 or 2 hats off it because that's all you want to do, but you can be poaching someone else's idea. So my advice to milliners is to try and be original. Source your blocks from the proper block makers throughout the world. If you want something that's unique, the best way to do it is make your shape, send it to the block maker, whoever it is, and have them make it for you, and then cross your fingers that no one else will go and knock it off. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say there. If you've got any questions for me, fire away. Or Catherine might kick me off if I've run out of time.
That's right, I can stay here till midnight.
Any questions for me, or? No?
Thanks, Darryll, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
What do you think's in fashion this year, Darryll?
I don't know. Fashion's an interesting thing. You know, when it was all wired headbands and turbans, that ended up being probably one of the worst years for me because people didn't need blocks. So fashion can be a difficult one. My favourite fashion is anything that needs a hat block. And you know, there are people that tell you what fashion is, what's going to be popular, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not right. Who knows? And the Australian market is very different to America and it's very different to Europe. Yep.
What's roughly your turnaround time?
My turnaround is usually 3 weeks. Sometimes it can get 6, 7 if it's really busy. At the moment it's probably running about 2, which I think is one of the shortest turnarounds for block makers. Trade secret. Yep. But it's good wood. It's good wood. It's easy to pin. It's very similar to American basswood and the what's the European lime, I think it is. But it's neither of those. But it's what I can source here in Australia. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything you should do to your blocks to keep them nice?
Yeah. Don't use them.
Yes.
I don't know why people think it's appropriate to stick pins in hat blocks. They're ornaments. No. Learn really good blocking techniques. You don't need a million pins. You need blocking springs. You need cord. Things that need a hollow in the top very often get a presser shape to help press them. You should be able to do most blocking with very few pins. Elastic is really good, all that sort of stuff. Don't use thumbtacks, use proper blocking pins. Don't use nails. You should never need to use a hammer and tacks. And other than that, cover them with plastic or a bag or foil or something to protect them. Don't leave them in the sun and stuff like that. Other than that, they're a tool. You know, there's nothing like seeing a block that's been completely flogged to death and worn out. And sometimes it's because they've been misused when they didn't need to have a million pins and the block has got no wood left. But just, yeah, but they're a tool. They're supposed to eventually get worn out. So, yeah, just look after them. Don't use them. Put them on the shelf and look at them. Yeah.
Thanks, Darryll.
That's it.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Thank you.